But as I began to surrender back to him that morning, and those feelings that I was feeling, loneliness and just grief and heaviness, he just filled me up. And it just became so evident that he was the gift in all of that.
To appoint unto them that mourn in Zion, to give them beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness, that they might be called trees of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that he might be glorified. Isaiah 61:3. Beauty for ashes. Hi, and welcome to Mid-South Viewpoint. I'm Byron Tyler. Today, Jennifer Bratton joins us. Jennifer, welcome to, used to be your hometown, Memphis. You now reside in Alabama.
I do. Lived in Memphis for 14 years, but have been in the Birmingham area since 2007. So both are kind of home.
Yeah. I understand that you are a slowly recovering type A control freak who loves a good spreadsheet and a day planner.
Absolutely. That is very accurate. I had a friend help write that description. So yes, control freak. In fact, I've thought about writing some devotional series, and my first one will be Devotions for Control Freaks.
I love that. Well, you graduated from Union University with a degree in communications. You've worked in the corporate real estate for over 25 years. Currently hold a key leadership position as Director of Corporate Facilities for a large financial services company. I'm assuming they're in Alabama.
Yes, based in Alabama, but throughout the Southeast, so Texas to Florida.
Do you travel sometimes?
Travel quite a bit.
Do you really?
Yes.
You've got two wonderful children,
yes,
Emma and Ben.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll talk about Emma and Ben. But let's just jump in here and tell me a little bit about you. Where did you grow up? Tell me about your family.
Sure. I grew up in the southern part of Illinois, which is the beautiful part of Illinois. So lots of rolling hills and farms.
That area?
About 45 minutes north of Cairo. Yes,
okay,
absolutely. Yeah. So a part of Illinois called Lick Creek. So grew up on the family farm that my husband Mike used to call the Ponderosa. It was one of those places where we were surrounded by family. Grew up in a Christian family that was always in church. My grandparents had the farm and very much wanted to use it to glorify God. And so we were constantly having church events out at the farm.
Wow.
The youth group, I think, lived at the farm. When I was growing up, I thought it was cool to hang out with all the cool college and high school kids there.
Wow.
And so just grew up in a beautiful Christian family, always in church, and I'm so thankful for that.
Jennifer, what a heritage.
Amazing heritage.
Rich,
yes.
Deep heritage in the faith. Okay, what were some of your dreams? A little girl has these dreams. What were some of yours?
Oh, my goodness. Well, for a while, I thought I was going to be the next Jane Pauley, so I'm dating myself. I thought I was going to be on TV and do all these cool interviews and, interview famous people, and that was going to be my calling. So that was why I headed into communications. Also dabbled in music a little bit, and so that actually led me into radio for a while.
I didn't know you had a radio background.
A little bit. Yes.
Yeah.
So I took radio in college, and one of my professors asked me if I had ever worked in radio before, and I had not. And he said, well, I have a friend who owns a station that's looking for somebody. Are you interested? And so college student working in radio, how cool is that?
Totally,
to pay the bills. So I did that for a while, and that's actually where Mike and I met.
Okay.
So I was interning. You got to watch out for those interns at a radio station that he was working at.
That was my next question. Yeah. How did you meet Mike Bratton?
Yeah, that was it. I walked into a studio to train, and he was doing the show in front of me, and that's how we met. We ended up doing a morning show together for quite a while, and he proposed to me on the air.
Did he really?
Yes.
Oh my goodness! Were you expecting that? Was it a surprise or?
Well, it wasn't a surprise that he proposed.
Sure. Yeah.
It was a surprise that he proposed that day.
The way he did it. Wow, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
It's funny. I think that you say that. Now, going back my 35 years of married to my wife, Pam, I actually proposed to her at the radio station.
See?
Yeah, I just now realized that.
Yeah, there you go.
That's where I did it at. Okay, we mentioned Ben and Emma. Tell me about the kids.
Yeah, so Emma is about to be a junior. She goes to Wright State University. She majors in musical theater. So she has that acting bug, like her father did.
It's in the DNA.
And it's voice. She sings beautifully.
Wow.
And so she's pursuing that. And then Ben is 15. He is a high school sophomore. And he is very much he has one of those dual brains where he loves art. He loves sketching and drawing, but he also loves science and computers.
Really?
So we're anxious to see how that culminates and what he's interested in. He's expressed some interest in concept art, video game design, architecture. Who knows where it's going to go?
It's unlimited. Yeah.
Right.
When did you find out the news that Mike had cancer?
Yeah. So he actually, in 2015, had started having some pain in his hip. And he had been working out, doing CrossFit, and we kind of thought, oh, he's just injured himself somehow. And after a few months, it just wasn't getting any better, and he went to the doctor to get that checked out, realized he had to have hip surgery. But after that hip surgery, the pain never really went away completely. And they sent him to a pain management specialist. And it was at that appointment with the pain management specialist where they ran multiple scans. A very observant radiologist just happened to, I don't really believe things just happened to, but he happened to see an enlarged lymph node on the edge of a scan. And they asked us to come back to the hospital for more tests. And before we left that day, this was June of 2015, we learned he had a large tumor in his kidney.
Wow. That's pretty devastating news.
It was devastating news. Obviously not something you ever, you ask about little girls and their dreams. That's not anything you ever plan, to happen in your life. But at the same time, we felt peace about it. We knew who was in control. And I remember a conversation with the doctor before we left that day that, this has taken us by surprise, but it hasn't surprised our God.
Right.
And we're trusting him with the next steps.
And the doctor's diagnosis at that point, I mean, was there a percentage saying, hey, we could actually see, recovery pretty nicely here, or did he give you any hope at all?
Yes. No, very hopeful at first.
Yeah.
At first that they thought it was a renal cell carcinoma tumor, which usually they said we can remove the kidney, might need a little bit of chemo, but it's very treatable.
Yeah.
So we were hopeful that that's what would happen. But after the surgery to remove the kidney, we got the pathology reports back and found out it was a different type of cancer entirely, and one that was more aggressive and had already progressed almost to stage 4 at that point.
Yeah.
So we knew then that we were in for a pretty long battle.
What was the determined treatment plan?
At that point, he went in for some pretty aggressive chemo, did that for several months. Actually had to stop it after a while because it was taking such a toll on his body.
Yeah.
But after that...
And Mike's a big guy, too.
He was a big guy, 6'4".
Yeah.
Even after having lost weight and doing CrossFit, he was still 270,
Yeah, solid.
Solid guy,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
But the chemo had taken such a toll on his body, he could barely walk and barely stand. And they got aggressive with it. I mean, it was an aggressive round of chemotherapy, but we had to stop it because he just couldn't tolerate it. But still, we were hopeful. And that seemed to take care of the cancer. But over the next few years, it just continued to metastasize and show up in other areas of his body. He had more surgeries, immunotherapy treatments, radiation.
Right.
And it just became evident that,
Jennifer, when did the battle with cancer end for Mike?
He died February 11th, 2018.
Okay. I can't imagine, a young family and just experiencing something like this. But I've read some of your blogs, and we're going to talk about this journey that you've been on this over a year now, since his passing. You sent out I don't know if it was a message through a blog or something I got a hold of, and I read, and I said, wow, God is up to something in Jennifer Bratton's life, and I think it's a story that we need to share, and that's why we're here today. What about with the kids? I mean that is big news too for the children.
Yes.
For their dad leaving. Talk about that process for the family, for you and the kids.
Yeah, it was. They were 19 and 14 when he died. So they had been seeing him, progress through this illness for several years. And that's a hard thing, especially for a son, I think, to watch your dad go from being this, like you said, big guy. And Mike was big, not just physically. He had a big personality.
Oh, my goodness, yeah. And that's one of the things, too. I just stop here and just talk a little bit about Mike. I mean, he, as you mentioned, his radio career, even here in town, I mean, he was on WRVR for a while. Right. And I know other stations, too.
Kix 106.
Kix 106. Yeah. One of the things that some folks watching, listening might remember Mike Bratton, was that he played a very serious role in the Memphis Passion play at Bellevue.
He did.
And he was Caiaphas.
Yes.
And he had an incredible acting ability, and it was a passion for his. He wanted. Matter of fact, when we came back from the mission field on Guam, my youngest son was interested in learning about acting. He was a little nervous about it, but Mike was doing this on Wednesday night class at church. And I decided to join since we were new back in the area, didn't have a lot of friends, I would do it with him. And we had more fun with Mike
that's great.
teaching this acting class. He was so, he was so incredible the way he worked with people. And as you well know that, he just had a real unique gift. But I really think it was his passion and love for Jesus.
Yes.
Oh, by the way, he also worked at Love Worth Finding Ministries, where Adrian Rogers' radio and TV ministry is sent out all over the world.
He did. He was a radio editor there for years, and he had a passion for the arts, but more so he had a passion for using the arts to tell people about Jesus.
Yeah.
And he really wanted to recapture that and use that as a tool. And we're trying to carry on that legacy.
Well, it's got to be exciting for you to see that kind of, duplicating through Emma's life, where she is in singing and also acting possibilities. The scripture says there's a time to mourn. Mm-hmm. How has God shown up in the Bratton home during this time?
Oh, wow. Do we have several hours?
Yeah, let's take it.
People ask me a lot of times, where have you gotten your strength, through all of this? And obviously it comes from the Lord. I mean, we are weak. We cannot bear any grief like this on our own. It is all Him in us and at work in us. But I did a lot of grieving in advance of His death, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
I am one of those people that hopes and prays for the best, but I'm pragmatic, so I prepare for the worst.
Yeah.
And so early on, even before it got to the point where we knew there was no further treatment, I prayed and I said, okay, God, this is obviously not anything that I had planned on, but you knew this was going to happen. You knew this was going to be part of our story. You knew this was going to be part of our life. And I'm just surrendering that to you.
Yeah.
And I'm just telling you, you have it to do with whatever you want to do with it. And that was so healing, just to lay that at His feet.
Yeah.
And He just showed up through the grief and all of that, and that willingness to surrender that.
Jennifer, when you and Mike both realized there wasn't going to be a turnaround, that this was going to be the end, through this cancer, what were some of your conversations together? How did Mike talk with you? How did he prepare you? What kind of words did he leave you with?
Wow. So that last doctor's appointment where we were in the oncology office, and he basically said, there are some other things that we can try, but they're not going to prolong your life. Obviously, we were visibly, upset and shaken, and there were some tears shed. But we looked at each other and we said, wait a minute. Our purpose in life is to be here and glorify God for whatever time He has for us. And maybe the timing is different than we had planned, but our purpose hasn't changed.
Yeah.
It's still ours to glorify God with whatever time He gives us. And so we committed to each other that that's what we were going to do. And we prayed right then and there in front of the oncologist, who I don't believe was a Christian, that God would give us the strength to do that, and that He would use this for His glory in whatever way He saw fit.
Did you notice things changing maybe in the atmosphere when you guys were together because of that prayer?
Absolutely, yeah. It made you singularly focused on all this other stuff in life. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter.
Kind of changes priorities, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Jennifer, you said in a recent blog post, I believed the faithful promises of God, promises to strengthen me, Isaiah 41:10, sustain me, Psalm 3:5, to give me peace, Isaiah 26:3, to comfort me, Psalm 23:4, and to never leave or forsake me, Deuteronomy 31:8. And I had read the promise to people of Jerusalem contained in Isaiah 61:3 that there would be beauty, joy, and the garment of praise for mourning. I had quoted the verse and sang the words in worship, yet had never really considered what they meant. Mm-hmm. What have you discovered about those verses now, what they really mean?
That beauty is Him.
Wow.
It's Jesus. And, I'm ashamed to say that I didn't originally think that way. When I considered the words in that verse, I was looking to that verse somehow as a way to say, or in my life to be manifested in, okay, you've had this great loss, you've paid your dues, life's going to be easier for you from here on out, whatever that looks like. It was a very human way of looking at things. But as I began to surrender back to him that morning, in those feelings that I was feeling, loneliness and just grief and heaviness, he just filled me up. And it just became so evident that he was the gift in all of that. And through all of this, I have developed such a greater intimacy in my relationship with Jesus than I have ever had.
Yeah.
And, I tell people that, although obviously I would not have wanted or wished for my husband to die, at the same time, I wouldn't trade what it's done for my relationship with Jesus for anything. And I know where Mike is, and I know he wouldn't want to come back.
I did an interview recently with Gracia Burnham. I don't know if you know her or her family. They were missionaries in the Philippines in the jungles for about 17 years. On their 18th anniversary, she and her husband were overtaken by militant Muslims and carried into the jungles for over a year. Wow. And moved around. There was different firefights that tried to get them, released. But at the end, after over a year, and they're separated from their 3 kids for that period of time, both of them were shot, she in the leg and her husband in the chest, when he died there on the field in the jungle. This happened back to early 2000, but the whole interview, I just kept hearing this joy that was louder than the words that she was saying.
Yes.
And truly, that has to be something that only Jesus Christ can provide.
Yes, absolutely. And that's key. I mean, like you said, it's just a joy that is, it's almost too difficult to explain to somebody that doesn't understand it. I just cannot describe. I have this hunger for his word. Yeah. I have always, I was a Christian at 8, and I've always studied the Bible. I've always been involved in church. But my worship is just so much sweeter, now than it used to be. And I just, I have this love for him that I just haven't had in my life before.
Jennifer, what kind of exchange or trade do you believe the promise in Isaiah 61 requires? You mentioned that also in your blog.
Yes. It's a surrender. It is an absolute surrender. God, the Christian life is one of surrender. We have to die. We have to die to ourselves. We have to die to our sin, to our expectations. And that doesn't mean, I think a lot of times we're scared at the idea of surrender, and we think, oh, God's going to call me to do something drastic in the mission field, or God's going to take someone, important in my life, and I have to surrender that. But it's also surrendering the broken, ugly things as well. And that has been the key for me in all of this, is just surrender, day by day, moment by moment, surrendering the good, the bad, everything, and just laying it at his feet. So when we give that back to him and allow him to use that in whatever way he will, then he brings joy back to us.
The process of turning those ashes over to him and allowing him to do as he wills, would you also talk about that?
Yeah.
Did that happen pretty soon, pretty quick, or?
It was a process. Initially after Mike died, sort of in a fog, you're just in this grief fog. But at the same time, let me back up just a little bit. Before he died, as I knew that his final weeks were approaching, I felt compelled to write an obituary for him and a eulogy for him that reflected his big personality and who he was.
Yeah.
And I felt like God really gave me those words, and that was very healing for me. In offering up that, that grief and that sadness, he poured this into me. And ever since then, it feels like the words won't stop, that the words just continue to flow. So that has been part of that exchange as well.
What does it practically look like for you to offer your brokenness as a sacrifice to God?
It's releasing expectations. That brokenness is a humbleness. Going back to what we said at the beginning, my need to control. It's giving that up.
Right.
And also not limiting God. God is a big, big God. And I think so often we limit what he wants to do, whether it's in our brokenness and pain or whatever it's in our humanness. but just not limiting him and letting him just have his way.
Something else in Zephaniah 3:17 that you mentioned is that the verse says, he will take great delight in you. In his love, he will no longer rebuke you, but will rejoice over you with singing.
Yes.
I mean, sometimes we don't get the picture of God singing over us.
Yeah.
You know?
That blows me away that our holy God sings over us. And if you think about that picture of like a mother or a father singing a lullaby to their baby and just the pure love and joy that they have for that child, that's the picture that I have in my mind when I read that verse. And to think that God does that for me just blows me away.
Jennifer, why do you think that God's people find it hard to believe that holy God actually delights in them?
I think a lot of times that it's because we have this picture of God and we think of him as a judge. We think of his wrath. We think of him, waiting to punish us if we're disobedient. And there is, disobedience has consequences, and that is obviously part of God's character. But we lose the fact that he's our Father and what that father relationship is like. And there has to be both.
Yeah. What are some of the words that you feel like describe you right now?
Joyful. Surrendered. Again, that keeps coming up. Surrendered. And not to say that I've figured all that out. That is a moment-by-moment lesson.
Yeah.
But there's this desire in me to really surrender every moment.
Yeah, and I think that's so critical because we think, well, I prayed that prayer, God, that I gave it all to you, but like you said, it's a moment, it's daily, continuing to offer that to him.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. What do you say, Jennifer, to those listening who are mourning the death of a spouse or someone very close, maybe a child, but they just can't seem to find this joy that you're describing today?
Get in the Word. Like God's Word has become so much more alive to me and real. I made a commitment at the first of the year to put away all the commentaries and all the books that I had been reading about what other people thought about God's Word, and just daily just studied and read the Bible and read it more systematically. Reading whole books of the Bible, at a time, and really, focusing in on that whole narrative. I spent a lot of time in Paul's epistles.
Yeah.
Which,
wow. Yeah, good stuff. Yeah.
But I'm a big fan of Jen Welkin, Bible study teacher at the Village Church in Dallas, and she has this saying. I don't know if it's hers or if she stole it from somebody else, but she says, "The heart cannot love what the mind does not know." And I find myself repeating that and finding that to be so true in my life. And if you think about it in terms of human relationships, it's true.
Yeah.
I mean, you love your spouse more and more the more intimately you know them. Mm-hmm. Well, the same is true of our relationship with Christ. And so the more we read his word, the more we know about him, the more deeply we fall in love with him, which gives us a hunger and a thirst for more of his word.
Yes.
And it's just this cyclical, and there's not an end to it. There's never an end to it.
And there's so many distractions, the cell phone, activity, busyness and stuff. It's just, it keeps us away from the word.
Yes. Absolutely. Yes. So I get up at 5 o'clock every morning. And that's what I do. I immediately get into the Word and have my time of prayer and Bible study. And just starting off the day like that is so grounding. And unfortunately, what I find myself doing is, 45 minutes, an hour later, I'm like, darn, I have to go to work. I have to get Ben up for school. I want to keep, reading this. It's like I can't get enough.
Yeah. Okay, you're a very busy lady. As I mentioned in the beginning, you've got this corporate position. I know it must keep you quite busy. You're traveling. But there's this new place you're in right now that you sense God is wanting to open up. You've created like a Facebook blog page. No, you actually have a website.
I do.
Yeah,
yes.
And you're blogging.
Yes.
You're sharing these stories from your heart. Tell me about this aspect. What do you feel like God's leading you to do now?
Well, that's a good question. I'm kind of taking each step as it comes. Like I said, I felt compelled to write a eulogy and obituary that honored Mike. And writing was not ever something that I ever pursued before, or even would have said I had a passion for. But I just feel like since then I can't stop.
Yeah.
And so every time I had posted something on, my social media outlets or something about what I felt God was teaching me, I would get a tremendous response from people that it touched them or that it helped them or asking for prayer. And I kept having people approach me saying, will you please write a book? Will you come speak to my, grief group or whatever it was? And finally, I couldn't ignore that, and had some very good Christian friends and counselors that said, you need to pursue this. God has a purpose in this. And I drug my feet because I am busy. And I thought, okay, God, how am I going to do this?
Well, when I was moved when I read your blog post and just started reading some of your story. I prayed for you and Mike during the time. I know I'm just one of many, many people who prayed you through a lot of these times. We know each other from a distance. I knew Mike, better. But right now, God is opening doors and He's providing opportunities. So, someone listening right now that might want to entertain your coming to share with their group, or you're open to this.
Absolutely, yes. There's a way on my website, it's jenniferbratton.com, that you can contact me via email, and so we can connect. And I made a promise to God that, God doesn't waste any of our suffering or our sorrow. He has a purpose and a plan for all of it. And I promised Him early on that, despite time constraints or whatever else was going on in my life, that I would not give up any opportunity to share what He's done in my life and His love.
What is the verse in Corinthians that talks about, when we've gone through hardship and pain, God takes that, how He's comforted us, so that we're able to take that in turn and comfort others who are going through similar valleys and hardships.
Absolutely. And that's been one of the most humbling things as I've shared my story to see that, God doesn't need to use us. I mean, He's all powerful, but what a privilege that He does use us. And that's so humbling, and it's healing as well, to see how, the things that He's spoken into my life that I can speak into the lives of others, and it's healing for me and healing for them. It's just beautiful.
Jennifer, this has been so awesome. Thank you so much for being so transparent, sharing your heart. How do we keep up with Jennifer Bratton and just the exploits and the ventures and the things that are going to be for the future? How do we keep in contact with you? You mentioned the website.
Website, jenniferbratton.com. I also have a Facebook page, Jennifer Bratton. So that's very much a work in progress. I'm still exploring, what all that's going to mean, and still learning how to manage all of that. But anything that I'm doing as far as speaking or writing, I'll be, posting on those two outlets.
Wow. Well, I ask our friends to make sure you go to the website again, Jennifer Bratton. That's BRATTON.com. Is that right? Yeah,
yes.
.com, and learn more. There's some wonderful blog posts there. You can connect. I'm sure there's something there that will really speak to your heart. Maybe you're going through a particular area that Jennifer's written about and can relate to through Scripture. So I hope you will tune in to that post. Jennifer, my goodness, my dear sister, thank you for what you're doing for Christ's kingdom, for people who are hurting, for people to experience that they're in the life of pain, can know that there is joy unexpressible. There is peace that you cannot explain that comes from one source, and that's Jesus Christ.
Yes. Whatever the circumstance, whatever the season of life that you're in, whatever the question you have, Jesus is the answer.
Wow. Well, friends, that's all the time we have on this edition of Mid-South Viewpoint. Thanks for stopping by. I'm Byron Tyler, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.